Hello, I'm Rowan Smith from the Tasmanian Institute of Agriculture, and today we're at the Pasture property at Pipers River in northern Tasmania. We've just sown an experiment focusing on resilient pasture species mixes. It's part of the federal government's Future Drought Fund long-term trials program, looking to see if we can come up with some pasture species mixtures that are more resilient to extended and more regular periods of dry times. So it's common in this area to sow perennial ryegrass and white clover, so we're using that as sort of our benchmark, and we've sown 12 treatments and we're altering the amounts of legume and herb and grass in those mixtures. So a basic mix has only got the perennial ryegrass at a heavy rate, and from there we sort of step up through a range of different treatments that add multiple different grass species and multiple different legume species and herbs to the mix, all the way up to a complex mix that has around 12 species in it. It's kind of been more common to focus on 2 or 3 species, and I guess more recently in cover cropping and sort of more regenerative practices, it's become more popular to sow a much bigger and wider range of species certainly in cropping systems, and we're having a look now to see whether that will work and how it works in a perennial pasture system. So I guess the proponents of those more complex mixes is that once you start to step up across a range of different functional groups or different sort of families of pasture species, they seem to complement each other. Well, certainly that's what's advocated, and that's what we want to have a look at. Those complex mixes, if we get up to sort of 10 and 12 species, do they complement, or do they actually start to restrict some of the other key species that might provide the bulk of the feed or the bulk of the higher nutritional aspects that we're looking for in a pasture? Certainly, particularly across northern Tasmania in the last 18 months, we've seen extended periods of dry time over summer and into autumn. We didn't really get an autumn break this year, and so particularly our high rainfall pastures are heavily reliant on perennial ryegrass, which we know if it becomes moisture stressed will really back off in its productivity. And if it gets seriously dry, then we start to lose plants out of that pasture. So what we're looking at is, can we add a cocksfoot or a fescue into that mix, and does that sort of then start to take over in those dry times, see that pasture through that dry time, and then away you go again once good times return. So we've got this site here in the high rainfall zone, but we've got another site at Campbelltown. So we're also we've got another 12 treatments there, but they are quite different with the species that we're using there. Using a lot of more lower rainfall species, so starting from a base point or a control point in being phalaris, and then adding cocksfoot and other fescues, both Mediterranean and continental species. And then I guess being a low rainfall environment, we start to use the annual legumes more and more into those mixes.